you need to give Myanmar something so that you have something to take away. And I think ASEAN's sin is that it hasn't really given anything much to Myanmar.
Please go ahead, Misha.
Okay, I just want to ask that if sanctions can make it work the other way, which is lifting the sanctions actually can solve the problem, seeing that Indonesian military government succeed in lifting out millions of people from poverty, and still there is enough place for corruptions, given enough incentives and no sanctions. So why cannot the junta actually do that? I mean, is it possible? By lifting up sanctions and given more incentives to the junta and cooperate with them, it's possible that maybe they could bring significant development, economic development to the country.
Yes, Suharto basically. They're like Suharto. Yeah, okay, good.
I think we're on the same page. I think we're on the same page. You start off by lifting everything, by seeking deeper engagement, by getting more involved with Myanmar before you find that you have any leverage. I think we should go into Myanmar, and really I think if there weren't all this misunderstanding about doing business with Myanmar, I think some ASEAN countries might think that it's in their interest to send their government-linked corporations into Myanmar.
But going through your point, actually, it couldn't happen that way to me personally, because what Myanmar is giving to the rest of ASEAN or Asian states is natural resources. By that time that change happens, there will be a total depletion of that, right? And that's the reason why we need to put a stake now in the change in Myanmar, because we can't wait for that time. There's so many refugees around in Southeast Asia from Burma. I've been working with them, for instance, right? In Malaysia, in Thailand. I think we can't wait for that, precisely because of the natural resources. I mean, it's funny because I was reading Irrawaddy News today. There is a company that was not listed in the US black listing, right? And this company called IG or something like that, it's new Changi Point. It's dealing with Burmese rice. Can you get it? They export Burmese rice to Singapore when the Burmese in Burma is out of rice stock. I mean, what more can I say?
Thank you.
No, I think that's the complexity about getting onto the ground, getting your businesses onto the ground in Myanmar that I referred to just now. It gets people really upset. But if you want countries to take an interest in you, and you are a country or you are a people, you need to give them something. And I think it's a good sign. I think it's a good sign that some countries see themselves as having an interest in Myanmar, or even having interests which are in competition with other countries' interests in Myanmar. It could work out for the better. It could. It doesn't have to, but it could.
Professor, I've actually got more questions after the last round. I think it's good to liberalize and get everybody in, but there is a conditionality that you also put forward about companies observing CSR. How would one expect the global compact issue to be to really hit the ground in a country like Myanmar right now, where the power is with so few? That's one. Two, my premise has always been that ASEAN suffers from weak leadership, both from people who have seized power by default or whatever, as well as those who are very strong. And when we have this diversity within the leadership, how would ASEAN constructively engage even in this area of just going into Myanmar? I understand the concept of all that, but ASEAN for 40 years has always suffered from implementation, which is a tagline now. So how would you reconcile on those fronts? Thank you.
Mark?
I heard Prof. Lin said that it's time for the international community to be more engaged with Burma, and it's even time for the US and EU to lift their sanctions and to let their companies do business in Burma, and so that at the end they will be more engaged and have a leverage on Burma. Based on my experience in Burma, I don't think so, because just think about ICRC. They are not even a business. You said that corporate social responsibility of the international corporations will somehow relieve the hardships of the Burmese people and somehow solve the issues of Burma. ICRC is doing that in their ways as an international NGO. But once they have become too engaged in the eyes of the military junta with the Burmese people, and when they have become very successful in some aspect in solving the issues and hardships of the people in Burma, their branches in the provincial towns were forced to close down. Yeah, and they were even, not allowed to enter, certain areas of the country. So, with such an obstinate and evil government in Burma, how can the international corporations to be more engaged with Burma? Thank you.
Mark's question. I think there's a huge difference between being the ICRC and being someone who's giving you money. That's the difference. If I'm the ICRC, I'm just giving you trouble. If I'm giving you money, I think you'll treat me slightly differently. In relation to Bremer's point, I think Bremer's basically saying some countries might have pretty tight rules that regulate the way their companies behave abroad, and some other countries don't. I think we can leave it at that.
I think that really is always a challenge for any law professor to give a public law lecture about a very sensitive topic. It's far easier about something relatively technical. Even the perhaps Pedro Banca would be something more suitable for a law professor to discuss publicly. Because when one deals with such a hot potato like Myanmar, there are always people who would say, let's do whatever we can to solve that problem there. And they may say things which are not so much to do with law, or even be sometimes illegal. For example, many times people now suggest you just freeze any assets we like in Singapore. And we say to them, well, we don't have a law for that, or how do we decide whose assets to freeze? And they don't care, So it's seen as legal niceties because the problem is so grave. And I have some sympathy for that. But I think that's not what law professors do. I taught for a number of years human rights law with Professor Lim. I'm very happy to have done so. I hope to do it again sometime, somewhere between here and Hong Kong. But I thought that in that class, I was always teaching human rights and law, and Dr. Lim is always teaching law, international law, and human rights. And I think that today, and that's perfectly valid, in fact probably more valid for law school than an activist. I think Dr. Lim has acquitted himself brilliantly today. He's talked about the law, the ways to think about using the law, but also the limits of law in trying to approach a very real life buzzing problem. I know that his closing and very current recommendation we engage Myanmar is going to rile most of you activists out there, particularly because the incidents of the violence of the recent past are so fresh. But I think there's something that professors need to voice and think about, because they need to think in a slightly longer term time frame, more about principles, institutions, and law, rather than a reaction to immediate events. So with those thoughts, I'd like to give it back to the editor. Hang on, one more thing. I received this T-shirt earlier today from the very activist ASEAN Interparliamentary Committee on Hawkers on Myanmar. I thought I'd give this a present to Dr. Lim to his first step towards activism. It says courage and weird letters at the back. And so I'm sure there will be something more meaningful to Kim, but I thought I'd give this to you first. Very good.